It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind of day when time seemed to drift without purpose. Rain tapped lightly on the kitchen window while I stirred a pot of tea, the scent of chamomile floating through the air. The house was calm, almost too calm, as it had been for the past 5 years since my husband, Daniel, passed away. I never truly missed him, a fact I rarely admitted even to myself. We had grown apart long before his final breath, tethered only by a son we both loved more than anything. "Amma," my son called from the front door. He still called me Amma ever since he was little. "You dressed, thought we could grab a bite." I blinked, turning off the stove. "Now," he grinned as he stepped into the kitchen, still dripping from the rain. "Yeah, thought we'd check out this new pub near the edge of town. Just opened a few months ago. Good food, good music. You could use a little fun, don't you think? A pub." At my age, I gave him a look. "I'm not sure that's quite my scene, Aryan. Why don't you take one of your friends instead?" He came closer and draped an arm around my shoulder. "Come on, Amma, it'll be fun. Just for an hour. You barely go out anymore." There was no malice in his eyes, just concern and love. I sighed, gave him a soft swat on the arm, and agreed. I changed into a modest navy, blue sweater and slacks, combed my hair, and grabbed my umbrella. The pub, it wasn't what I expected. The place was surprisingly warm and inviting, dim yellow lights, rustic wooden tables, walls filled with old photographs, vinyl records, and quirky signs. It smelled like old whiskey and fresh bread. A mellow song played from the jukebox in the corner. The air was thick with conversations and laughter, but not overwhelming. "See, not so bad," Aryan said, guiding me to a booth near the bar. We sat down, and a young waitress handed us menus. I scanned mine out of politeness, though I wasn't very hungry. As Aryan chatted about work and life, I let my eyes wander around the pub. And then I saw him, the bartender, a man in his early 60s, perhaps tall, with graying hair tied back in a low ponytail. There was something familiar about him. His hands moved with precision as he polished a glass, and when he looked up, our eyes met. My breath caught, he froze too. A second later, he was walking toward our table. "Amma," Aryan said, still talking. "I heard the owner's an ex-musician. Used to be in a band. Crazy, right?" But I wasn't listening. The bartender approached, slowly, cautiously, like someone seeing a ghost. He stopped beside me. "You're Mira." I flinched. "Yes," I replied, hesitant. "Do I know you?" He looked straight at me. And then, slowly, almost reverently, he reached out and took my hand. His grip was warm, familiar. And then he said something that turned my entire world upside down. "I've been waiting for you for 30 years. Silence for a moment. Everything around me vanished, the clinking of glasses, the low music, even Aryan's voice. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. I pulled my hand back, shaking slightly. I'm sorry. Who are you?" He smiled, but his eyes were glassy. Ravi Sharma." The name hit me like a punch to the stomach. Ravi Sharma, a name buried in the deepest part of my past. A name I hadn't dared speak in decades. A name that once meant everything. And suddenly, memories I had long silenced began to resurface, stolen glances, summer afternoons by the river, whispered promises under the stars, and the bitter end I was forced to accept. "Ravi," Aryan looked between us. "Do you two know each other?" I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. "But," Ravi answered, "we did, once, a long time ago, a flashback. 30 years ago I was 23, young, foolish, and in love. Back then, I had dreams of becoming a writer, of traveling, of building a life with someone who made my heart feel like it belonged in a poem. That someone was Ravi. He wasn't rich. He wasn't impressive in the eyes of my parents, but he was kind. Artistic, real. We spent 2 glorious years together in secret, hiding from my father's rage and my mother's disappointment. And then came the mistake, the pregnancy. My parents found out before I could tell Ravi. They locked me in my room for weeks. Arranged a quick marriage to Daniel, a stable, respectable man from a good family. They told me Ravi had left town. They told me he didn't want the baby. They made me believe he abandoned me. I cried for weeks. I married Daniel. And I raised Aryan, telling myself that maybe, just maybe, this was the life I was meant to live. Back in the present, you left. I whispered, still trying to wrap my mind around his presence. They said you left town, that you didn't want me, that you didn't want the baby. His expression darkened. I never left. They made sure I couldn't see you. Your father had me arrested when I tried to come to the house. I wrote letters, dozens. They were never answered. My heart sank. I only found out recently where you were, he added. I opened this place hoping you'd walk in one day. I didn't think it'd actually happen. Aryan was stunned, speechless. His brow furrowed. Wait, are you saying, what are you saying? I turned to my son, my beautiful boy. The one bright light in all those years of quiet misery. I don't know, I said, though deep down I did. I just couldn't bear to say it. Ravi looked at him with a kind of awe. You must be my son. The collapse. I stood up abruptly. No, this isn't the place. Not now. Amath, Aryan tried to stop me, but I was already moving toward the door. The rain had started again, heavier this time. It soaked through my sweater as I stepped outside, but I didn't care. My legs carried me down the road, back to the car, back toward a world that suddenly didn't make sense. Was it possible? Could everything I believed for the past 30 years have been a lie? If so, who was Aryan's real father? And what else had been stolen from me? Rain poured down as I drove home in silence, the windshield wipers beating like a panicked heart. My mind was a whirlwind of fractured memories and questions too painful to voice. Aryan sat beside me, quiet for once, the hum of the car engine the only sound between us. He didn't ask where I was taking us. He didn't press. He just stared out the window, jaw clenched, caught in the same storm that raged inside me. When we reached the house, I didn't go inside. I sat in the driver's seat, hands still on the steering wheel, staring into the night. After a long moment, Aryan finally broke the silence. Was he telling the truth? My hands tightened around the wheel. I didn't answer right away. How could I? I don't know. I whispered. I don't know what's true anymore. But you knew him before Dad? I closed my eyes, the weight of a memory pressing down on my chest like a boulder. Yes, I knew him, a lifetime ago. Aryan nodded, but he wasn't done. And you never told me. I thought he left me. I said quietly. I thought he abandoned me. That's what they told me. He was silent for a moment, and then, more carefully, and am I his? My breath caught in my throat. I had asked myself that question so many times over the years. I had done the math. I had suspected, but I buried the thought, wrapped it in denial, and threw it into the darkest corner of my soul. Because admitting it would mean that everything Daniel and I built, the shell of a marriage we maintained, was based on a lie. And worse, it would mean my parents stole not just my love, but Ravi's right to father his child. I never knew for sure. I said finally, my voice cracking. And by the time I could have found out, it felt too late, too painful. Aryan stared at me, eyes dark with emotions I couldn't quite place, confusion, anger, heartbreak. I think I need to talk to him, he said, and before I could stop him, he got out of the car and walked into the rain. A letter hidden in a book. The house was dim when I returned later that night. I peeled off my soaked clothes and sat in the living room, still trembling, still unsure of whether I was waking from a dream or slipping deeper into a nightmare. I poured myself a glass of wine. I hadn't touched the stuff in years, but tonight, my heart demanded something to dull the ache. On a strange impulse, I went to the bookshelf. It hadn't been touched since Daniel's death, row after row of dusty legal thrillers and financial guides. But behind them, tucked carelessly between two books on real estate law, I found something unexpected, an envelope. Yellowed with age, unopened, my fingers shook as I pulled it free. It was addressed to me from Ravi Sharma. My heart skipped. There were more, 6 letters in total, all dated between April and July, 30 years ago. Letters that had never reached me. Letters my husband, or perhaps my father, had hidden away. I opened the first one. Mira, they won't let me see you. I've tried everything. I came to your house, but your father threatened to call the police. I still don't understand why you won't speak to me. Did I do something wrong? Are you scared? I am too. But I love you. I need you to know that. And if what I heard is true, if you're pregnant, then please, please don't shut me out. I want to be there. I want to be part of it. We can figure this out together. Yours always, Ravi. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Every lie unraveled like thread from an old dress. My father had stolen those letters. My husband had helped bury them. And I had lived a half-life, believing the man I loved had thrown me away like a secret too shameful to keep. The man my husband was Daniel was dead, and I had mourned him, or at least mourned the version of him I had been trained to accept. A man of structure, of rules, of good breeding, but I knew in my bones that his silence over the years had not been ignorance. He knew, he had read those letters. He had made the decision to keep them from me. He had stolen a father from Aryan. He had stolen a future from me. And now that he was gone, the only person left to answer for it was me. The return to the pub the next day, I returned to the pub alone. The bartender, Ravi, was at the far end, wiping down a counter. His eyes met mine immediately, and for a moment neither of us moved. I approached slowly, clutching the envelope of letters in my hand. I found them. I said softly, "Your letters." His eyes widened. Then he closed them, as if in pain. "So it's true," I nodded. "They told me you never responded." He said bitterly, "that you chose him. I thought you left me." He sat down on a stool, leaning forward, elbows on the bar. "They ruined everything. I took the seat beside him. We can't change the past, but maybe we can face the truth now." He nodded slowly. "Does he know, Aryan, he went to find you last night? Did he come?" A ghost of a smile flickered across Ravi's face. "He did. We talked. Not for long, but long enough." I felt tears rising again, but I held them back. "I don't know how to make this right." "You don't have to," he said gently. "It wasn't your fault." I shook my head. "But he'll need answers, and I have to know, for both of us." He nodded again, reaching into the drawer behind the bar and pulling out a thin folder. "What's that?" I asked. "I had a DNA test done." I froze. "You're not the only one who suspected the truth," Ravi said quietly. "I found a tissue sample from a mug Aryan left behind last week when he came in with his friends. I know it's not the most ethical thing, but I had to know." My heart thudded in my chest. And he slid the paper across the bar. I opened it. 98% probability of paternity. I couldn't breathe. Ravi looked at me, eyes full of grief and wonder. "He's my son." Rising storm, and just like that, the world tilted again. Everything I had built my life around, every truth I had believed, every lie I had swallowed, shattered. I thought of Daniel, of my parents, of the funeral where I stood like a dutiful wife, of the nights I cried silently, wondering if love was ever real. And now here he was, the father of my child, still alive, still waiting. "Ravi," I whispered, "what do we do now?" He looked at me with that same softness I remembered from another life. "We tell him the truth, all of it, and then we let him decide." I nodded, even as my heart splintered in my chest. The past was back, and it demanded justice. I sat across from Aryan at our kitchen table, the DNA test folder resting like a thundercloud between us. The house was silent, stripped of all the warm illusions that once filled its walls. My son's eyes, dark like mine, shaped like Ravi's, scanned the document. Slowly, carefully, like he didn't want to believe it, like he couldn't, then softly, "So he's my father?" I nodded. Aryan leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable. "And all this time you didn't know," I suspected, I admitted. "But I buried it. I was afraid. I didn't want to break you. I didn't want to break everything." He let out a bitter laugh. "Well, everything's broken now anyway." A silence settled between us. He turned the document around, staring at it again. "He said he loved you. I looked down at my hands. He did. And I loved him too, more than anyone in this world. But back then, love wasn't enough. My father made sure of that." Aryan's expression tightened. Grandpa, of course. I didn't have to explain further. Aryan had always sensed the quiet venom in my father, the passive-aggressive control masked as stern care, the barbed compliments, the pride he took in his family's spotless reputation. He had Ravi arrested. I said, the words choking me. He told me Ravi left town, lied, took the letters, married me off to Daniel as soon as he found out I was pregnant. Aryan looked sick. "And Dad knew." I nodded. He knew everything. Secrets within the will later that night, as Aryan paced the living room trying to make sense of it all. I went into the study, a place I hadn't stepped into since Daniel's funeral. I opened the cabinet that held our legal files, blowing dust off the folders. At the very back was Daniel's will, and a sealed envelope marked with my name. I opened it with trembling hands. "Mira, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I owe you a truth I never had the courage to say in life. I knew Aryan wasn't mine from the beginning. The dates didn't add up. The look in your eyes, you were still in love with someone else. But I wanted you anyway. I thought I could be enough. And when I saw the kind of father Ravi would be, I couldn't bear to let him win. Your father promised me a life with you, respect, comfort. I took it. I raised Aryan like my own, but in doing so, I stole something sacred. I'm sorry for everything." "Daniel," I sank to the floor, the letter clutched to my chest, weeping for the girl I once was, the woman I became, and the years I'd never get back. Aryan's fracture, you knew I wasn't his. Aryan said the next morning, reading the letter over my shoulder, "And you raised me anyway. I loved you from the moment I saw you." I whispered, "It never mattered to me whose blood you carried." He nodded, but tears slid down his cheeks. "But it mattered to them. I was a trophy, a symbol, a lie." "No," I said firmly, cupping his face. "You were my son, my miracle, the only real thing I had in a house full of strangers." He broke then, finally, sobbing into my shoulder like the boy he once was. And I held him, rocking gently, promising myself I'd never let another lie come between us again. Ravi's truth. We met Ravi at the park, the same place where we used to meet in secret 3 decades ago. He brought tea in a thermos, just like he used to. The moment Aryan saw him, something shifted. There was no shouting, no blame, just grief and curiosity. They sat on a bench, side by side, talking in low voices as I watched from a distance. It was strange, watching 2 pieces of myself forming their own bond. When I finally joined them, Ravi looked at me with a softness I thought I'd never see again. "He has your fire," he said, "and your stubbornness." I replied, smiling through tears. Aryan laughed, a short, disbelieving sound, and then said, "I want to know everything, from the beginning, the love story, the betrayal, all of it." And so we told him. The love that was stolen, we told him about the poetry Ravi used to write on my arms when we were young. About the field we'd lie in, dreaming of music and books and futures that didn't exist yet. We told him about the time we nearly ran away, the train tickets we never used. I told him about the night I found out I was pregnant, and the fear that bloomed inside me when my mother saw the test. How I was locked away, how they tore us apart. Ravi told him how he fought, how he was beaten, arrested, exiled from my life by a father who called him a disgrace. It was a story full of love and violence, of youth crushed under the weight of tradition, of people who thought they knew better, who thought their control was mercy. Aryan listened quietly, fully, and then he said, "They stole our lives, but they don't get to steal our future." A reckoning at the grave. We went to my parents' grave that weekend. I hadn't been in years. The headstone gleamed in the autumn sunlight. Dev and Latha Eir, loving parents, proud grandparents. I stood there, the wind tugging at my scarf, and let the anger boil over. "You lied," I whispered. "You tore us apart for your pride. You turned love into shame. You stole Ravi's son. You stole my life." Aryan stood beside me, silent but resolute. "You didn't protect your daughter. You owned her." And then Ravi, who had remained quiet all morning, said in a low voice, "You may have one then, but you've lost now." We left without flowers. Plans for justice back at home. Aryan had a surprising idea. "Let's write it," he said. "Write what?" "Everything, your story, his story, the letters, the betrayal, all of it." I hesitated. "To what end?" "To tell the truth, for every girl who's silenced, every love that's stolen by people who think they know best, for you, Amma." And so we did. Over weeks, we compiled everything, my journals, Ravi's letters, Aryan's own reflections, a memoir, maybe, or a testimony, a revenge not with knives, but with words. Weeks turned into months, and little by little, I began to breathe differently. As if the air itself had changed, or perhaps I had. The truth no longer lived in the dark. It stood in the light, raw and unflinching. And somehow, it didn't destroy me, it saved me. Aryan's project became the heartbeat of our home. We sat together at the dining table night after night, stitching together the fragments of a buried past. The lies, the silences, the stolen letters, the grief of a young mother robbed of choice, and the agony of a man forced out of his own child's life. Ravi contributed too, shy at first, then bold. He even gave us old cassette tapes from the band he once played in. One had a song titled "Mirror Sky." I hadn't heard it in 30 years. I cried when he played it. The book that spoke for the silenced, the manuscript we created, wasn't just a memoir. It was a declaration, a story of stolen love and systemic betrayal, yes, but also a love letter to those who suffered in silence, daughters who were raised to obey, not speak, sons who never knew their fathers, mothers who lost time, and lovers who lost years. We called it "Letters They Never Let Me Read." Aryan pitched it to a few small publishers. We didn't expect much, but then something strange happened. One of the editors who read it called Aryan and said, "This isn't just a story. This is a revolution in paperback." Revenge in paper and ink. The book was published in late spring. A modest print, a quiet release, but the internet found it. It exploded across social media. The story was shared, reviewed, debated. Young women messaged me saying, "This is my mother's story." Others said, "This is mine." The part that stung most readers. The letters, each one printed in full, each one proof of the truth they buried, proof that love did exist and was stolen for reasons as empty as pride. Some called it beautiful, some called it brave, a few called it scandalous, but no one called it a lie. And for the first time in my life, I felt something close to justice, not the courtroom kind, the kind that heals. Forgiveness and freedom. One quiet evening, Ravi and I sat on the same park bench where we once dreamed of running away. "I missed you every day," he said, eyes shining. "I thought of you every night." I replied. He reached for my hand, older now, lined, but still warm. "Do you think we missed our chance?" I smiled. "Maybe, but maybe this is the real one." He chuckled. "A second act at 60? Why not?" I said. "Some stories deserve a rewrite. We didn't need to start over. We simply picked up where we left off, softer, slower, but no less true. We didn't rush into romance. We took walks, shared memories, cooked together, and slowly, carefully, we began to love again. A son, reborn Aryan, changed too. At first, he struggled with the truth, not because he resented it, but because he felt robbed. His whole identity had been shaken, and yet he grew stronger for it. He reconnected with Ravi, visiting the pub often, even helping run events. The two formed a bond that didn't need blood to feel real, though the blood helped. One night, after an open mic event, he pulled me aside. "I think I want to change my name," he said. I blinked. "To what?" "Aryan Sharma." I felt my heart catch. "Are you sure?" I asked. He nodded. "Daniel was complicated, but Ravi, he fought for me, and you, I want the name of the man who never stopped waiting." I hugged him, holding on longer than I ever had before. Closure at last. There was only one final piece left. My parents' house had been locked up since their passing. No one wanted to live there. It sat like a mausoleum, cold, full of whispers and ghosts. I returned one last time. Alone, room by room, I walked through the remains of a life built on rules. I found photos of me and Daniel on the wall. Our wedding portrait, Aryan's first birthday, all pristine, framed, but none of them felt real. In the attic, I found my old journals, tucked behind a dusty trunk. Pages of poems, dreams, a letter I'd once written to Ravi but never sent. "I still love you, even if I can't say it out loud. Even if they won't let me see you again, I will always love you in every silent breath." I took nothing else from that house. Just the journals and the truth. Before I left, I lit a candle in the front room. Then I stood there, watching the light flicker. Not in mourning, in release. The final entry 6 months later. The book was nominated for a national award. We were invited to speak at a panel, Aryan, Ravi, and me. When I stepped on stage, I looked out at the crowd of young faces. So many daughters, so many sons, so many people searching for their truth. And I said, they took 30 years from me, but I got the rest back. And sometimes that's enough. Epilogue. The pub and the poem "The Pub" is now ours, all three of us. We renamed it The Lost Letters. People come not just for food, but for stories. Every Friday night, there's an open mic where anyone can share something they've never had the courage to say. One evening, Aryan stepped onto the stage. He held up a worn page, one of Ravi's old letters. He read it aloud, voice steady, proud. Then he said, "This is the story of how I met my father 28 years late, and how my mother taught me that truth is worth waiting for." Broken, red sweet revenge is not always about hurting those who hurt us. Sometimes it's about choosing to live better, louder, freer, in spite of them. And that, at last, is how we won.